Okay, we can begin to gather from our diverse squares. Tori, are you there? Am I being heard? Yes? Okay. See? The Hanukkah Masketeers. Okay, Tori, I looked up turducken. Where are you? I looked up turducken. It goes by different names. Yeah, I am not very culinary aware. So for those who are also somewhere in the middle of things, a turducken is a dish consisting of a deboned chicken stuffed into a deboned duck, further stuffed into a deboned turkey. Am I right?
I am so sorry to introduce any of you to this concept.
Well, that's very interesting. I'm going to have to flesh that out for a sermon sometime. See, outside the United States and Canada, it is known as a 3-bird roast. You know that? A good ducken is a traditional English variant replacing turkey with goose.
It's a nasty meal because if you don't take the skin off the chicken and the duck, all you've got is meat with greasy skin inside.
Wow.
And if you stuff it with anything, my daughter did it for Thanksgiving one year, and it was a total failure. I mean, total failure.
Okay, so you're saying that is something we should be ducking.
I think you should absolutely avoid it at all costs.
Okay. Now we know from somebody who cooks. How many of you are cookers? Lots of cookers among you? Yeah. Well,
Not one for meat, though.
Not for meat? Vegetarian? What are you eating there, Heather? That looks very healthy.
Like ice cream.
Ice cream.
Ice cream. No, it is.
In your
it is. It's earlier my time. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? It is a lot earlier my time.
Yeah.
And so my children and my husband are actually still sleeping.
You're being a bad girl. You're eating up the ice cream while
I'm eating bananas and peanut butter and milk.
Oh, okay.
It's a silent, just take it out of the refrigerator and make no noise breakfast.
That's healthy and comfort. Okay, well, welcome everybody. This is our last session for this series, and in about half an hour, we'll be joined by David Sklar.
Rabbi, I'm so sorry to interrupt. I see that the chat is disabled. So if there anybody, so I don't know how to fix that because I'm not a pro, but so sorry to trouble you. I just wanted to let you know if anyone wanted to input.
Is there anything here that you can fix?
And there it is.
All set. Okay, chat away. So what are we saying? Oh, we're going to be joined by David Sklar in a while. I'll introduce him when he joins us. Have a conversation on contemporary issues and organizational agenda and structure of the Jewish community. But before that, I just wanted to use these first 20 minutes as a kind of a opportunity for you to ask any questions, clarify any issues, and it can be about most recent classes. It can be about early classes. I trust that everything went well last week with the session on prayer with on life cycle with Rabbi Jenny, and that you could find your place in the continuum of the Jewish life cycle at this stage. Did you learn the stages of life from 5 years to 10 years to see? Everybody is, of course, in the wisdom years right now, right? And past, not only having wisdom, but ability to give wisdom. But if there's anything in your mind, let me just tell you that this series is over, but the opportunities for learning continue, especially those interested in conversion. Please continue to connect with our cocktail Judaisms. We're going to take a break in January, but in February, we come back with a very funny colleague of mine, Rabbi Bob Alper, who is a stand-up rabbi comedian. And we thought we should do something light in the middle of the winter. And he is a nationally recognized stand-up comedian somewhere in Maine or Vermont he lives. I forget which one of the two, but it's pretty much the same when you live up there, right? I think he's from Vermont. Then we have a series of other interesting speakers, including Jim Madison, Indiana historian at Indiana University. He's going to be talking to us about his recent book, The Klan in Indiana. We have Shari Rudofsky, our own member, who's going to be a journalist for the Indianapolis Star, who reports on medicine. She's going to be talking about a journalist reporting the pandemic and what issues are of importance to us, and several other programs. In addition, in the month of March, I will be doing a Sunday morning coffee conversation. I think it's being called Coffee Talk with the Rabbi. And one of those programs will include a Zoom with Israel. We're going to be having a session on religious pluralism in Israel with the leadership of the Masorti movement, the conservative movement in Israel that has an organization built into the movement that addresses issues of religious and cultural pluralism in Israel. So we'll be talking about issues like conversion and marriage and divorce and recognition of the non-Orthodox strands, and what are some of the contentious ongoing issues in the Jewish state regarding diverse expressions of Judaism. Stay tuned. Of course, we invite you always to participate in services, in the Torah Talks, and any other programs that you may see. Unfortunately, because we don't have the opportunity of coming together face to face, the more you can connect with the Jewish community, with the synagogue, the more you will begin to feel a part of the experience. Remember, we said early on that Judaism is not just a religion, it's just not a matter of believing. It is a civilization, and at the core of it is the experience of belonging. So believing, behaving, belonging. So try to find ways to express yourself and to find your way into those areas of Jewish experience and expression. I'm going to stop, and any questions, anything, even if you think it's not relevant and you feel that it has been bugging you or you want to raise it, do so now. We have about 15 minutes to do that.
I have a question.
Yes, Yana.
I have a question about traveling and visiting other synagogues, since I travel a lot. And I remember like 6 years ago, when I was applying for pharmacy schools and I still lived in Chicago, we went to South Florida with my friends, and we went to a Reform synagogue. And almost everyone there was from somewhere else. A lot of New Yorkers, we went there. So what are the general customs of visiting? I know Reform synagogues are more open to visitors than Orthodox. So what are the general customs, and how, like just general customs of visiting other synagogues while traveling?
Where were you traveling? In the United States or in Europe?
We were traveling to South Florida from Chicago.
Got it.
And in January, I want to take my fiance for his birthday to Aruba.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Beth-EL synagogue there, Reform. And I don't know if it will be open, but what are the general customs of visiting other synagogues?
Okay, pandemic issues aside, most synagogues are welcoming of visitors, not just liberal or reformed synagogues. Many people perhaps gravitate to those because they are they might be more in the public sight, but you would be welcome in any synagogue. Now, some Orthodox synagogues may be a little bit more restrictive, certainly in the roles that a woman as a visitor may have, as opposed to a man as a visitor. All Orthodox synagogues have some form of separate seating. If that is problematic for you, that's not a matter of hospitality, a matter of local custom, and you have to decide whether that is something that you are comfortable with. I would suggest that wherever you go to a place, first check out whether they are having public services at this time, or whether they're just doing Zoom services. In many of the islands, you mentioned Aruba, the synagogues are really expats, Americans, and others living there who have established either temporary or year-long communities. Now, some of the Caribbean islands, not so much Aruba, but its sister island, Curacao, have historic Jewish communities. In fact, the island of Curacao has the oldest Jewish community in continued existence in the American continent. And that is congregation Mikveh, Israel. And it is a beautiful historic synagogue. The current building was erected in 1732, but the synagogue community goes back in organized fashion to the 1650s. That happens to be my ancestral synagogue. My family came from there to the Caribbean, to Panama, and then offshoots of that congregation are also found in other Caribbean islands. St. Thomas, Virgin Islands, for example, has the oldest Jewish congregation under the American flag. St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. If you ever visit St. Thomas, go visit the synagogue on the hill. Beautiful, beautiful synagogue. Again, I don't know what's open at this point, and I discourage from too much congested visits anywhere at this time, and that is why we're being careful. But St. Thomas and Curacao are historic communities. Other islands, more vacation spots, have just kind of local congregations. But St. Thomas and Curacao are not the only ones. Jamaica has a historic congregation. Barbados has a historic congregation. So you have to read up on the history of the locations. But in general, synagogues are welcoming places. You may feel more at home in one setting rather than another. And some places have very cautious regulations due to anti-Semitism, maybe higher or lower in those areas. So in European synagogues, you have guards and sometimes barricades in front of synagogues because of the high level of anti-Semitism there. And you have to prove that you are a visitor. You have to sometimes even write in advance that you're coming. Even as a rabbi, I've had to write to congregations in advance to obtain a permit, and then you bring your passport and you show it. But those are not issues of inhospitality or lack of hospitality. They're issues of security that are unfortunate at this time. So that's a general description. I hope it's helpful.
Thank you.
Okay. Good question. Anything else? About anything? You mean you have no questions after all these sessions? Either we answered everything or we bored you to death. Or to comatose stage.
I guess, Rabbi, I have a question about actually the Interest in Judaism form.
Okay.
Which this is me saying I am a little bit late on that, but specifically in talking about like on the second sheet, things like Hebrew name and significance, and also like schedule of counseling sessions, but like in particular, like chosen Hebrew name and significance. That I guess, is that some those of us who are pursuing conversion are expected to have chosen and set out already, or is that something continuing on?
Question. I don't have the form in front of me, but I recall what you're saying. Yeah, some of those questions will unfold as we expand the process of conversion. One of the things that a convert chooses upon becoming a Jew is a Hebrew name. Most Jewish children are given at birth a Hebrew name, and it usually goes as first name, say David or Miriam, then Ben, son of, Bat, daughter of, or then the names of the parents. So as a person chooses to enter the Jewish faith, you adopt a Hebrew name. And this is something that we can explore further. Their names can be appropriate renditions of your English name into Hebrew if they exist. Like if your name is David, we have no problem with David, right? If your name is Hannah, we have no problem with Hannah. But sometimes names are of non-Hebraic origin, and we find an appropriate name, either in meaning or in sound or in opening letter, or you can opt for a name of a person that you admire, or a concept that you would like to use as a name for you. And this is something that we will discuss as the process of conversion unfolds.
Rabbi, because we're speaking about name, I just wanted to ask you, I wanted to have a name in Hebrew. I was born Jewish, but we were in a country we were not allowed to give any Jewish names. We had to head up to the calendar, Catholic country. So I would like, as I'm going older and getting wiser, I would like to have a Jewish name. How do we go about it? And I'm not converting because I am already Jewish.
Got it. So it would be interesting to look at what the meaning of the word Martin is. I'm sure it's not difficult. I can't, Martin. It's a very universal European, Romance Latin name. I would say that Miriam would be a very appropriate equivalent. The word mar in Latin and in Romance languages means water or sea, right? So the word Miriam is associated with waters because she led the Israelites across the waters. She placed her brother in the waters of the Nile. Now, it could be that the word Martin has bellic meaning having to do with war, but I am not sure. You would have to look it up. I don't have my name dictionary in front here, but any one of you who has a Google there, look up origin of the word Martin or Martin, and it might give you something interesting. Okay, Martinez, by the way, it's a Spanish name, very common among converso Jews who left Spain. Martinez. My great-great-grandparents' ketubah, marriage document, is signed by Elias Martinez as the officiant of the ceremony in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. But it's easy to get a name. For example, my name is Dennis, not very Hebrew name, right? Irish, but my Hebrew name is Daniel. So it's something similar. Although Dennis comes from Dionysius, so I should have chosen something related to wine, perhaps. Might have been more fun. Okay.
Rabbi?
Yes.
And when will we use our names? Like,
The Hebrew name is conferred and used as part of the conversion ceremony, and we will provide you with a certificate of conversion that will contain your name in English and the Hebrew name that you have chosen. For those of you who are continuing in the process of conversion, Rabbi Jenny will henceforth follow up with you, and she will be kind of the person who will henceforth, in contact, consultation with me, move the process forward. So you should be expecting to hear from her. And if you have any particular practical questions, you can be in touch with her as well. Yes.
Dennis,
Yeah.
I think the question may have also extended into use of the Hebrew name as we go forward in life after conversion or
Oh, yeah.
such as the Aliyah, etc.
Yeah. The question, if I understand, is when will we first use it? It'll be for purposes of the conversion, but that will be the name which will be used in your Jewish celebrational, liturgical, ritual life. And, you know, in congregations, many congregations call you to the Torah by using your Hebrew name. If there are children in your future, then your children will be known as so-and-so, the son, the daughter of, then your name, right? So my children are David ben Daniel Vesara. Sandy's Hebrew name is Sarah Leah, and my daughter is Devorah bat Daniel Vesara. In the case of people who choose Judaism, since your parents were most likely not Jewish, the tradition is to assign you the name so-and-so, Ben or Bat, as you may choose, Avraham Vesara. Abraham and Sarah kind of become generic Hebrew names, but they're also pointers to the first ancestors of the Jewish people, Abraham and Sarah. And the point of that is to indicate that the person who converts to Judaism is not a new Jew, but has entered into the line of the Jewish continuum since Abraham and Sarah. So you're immediately linked back to the origins. Okay, one more question. I see that David Sklar has joined us. So have you all experimented with your dreidels? Here's a colorful dreidel. What the letters in the dreidel are? Nun. Can you read the nun from your Hebrew? Gimel. Hey. Shin. Anybody knows what that means other than Alan and Tony?
Nes Gadol Haya Sham.
Ah, Betsy, thank you. Nes Gadol Haya Sham. Nes means miracle. Gadol, great. Haya was. Sham, there. A great miracle happened there. It is a reference to the Miracle of Hanukkah, and we celebrate the miracle. We light our menorahs. You're supposed to post your menorah in a public place. People should be able to see your menorah because you're supposed to proclaim the event of Hanukkah. So Nes Gadol. Now, if you live in the land of Israel, that letter changes, and it's not a shin, but a pei. And it reads Nes Gadol Haya Po. Po means here. Sham means there. So this is one of my most colorful dreidels. This is my very translucent dreidel. This is kind of a modern dreidel. It doesn't have sides. It just has all the indications at the top. I have one like this at my office, but it's not a Hanukkah dreidel. It just depends where it lands. It says, write sermon, do not work today, pastoral call. It tells me what to do every morning. And here's my most interesting. Anybody can read what it says? Say.
Es una pirinola.
You can read it.
Toma todo.
Toma todo.
Pon uno.
Take one,
Toma dos.
put one, put two, or take two,
Yeah.
Yeah.
take it all.
Right. So this is a little top that I bought in New Mexico. I just saw it in a market there. It's not a Hanukkah dreidel, but it is the same concept as the dreidel, a top for gaming purposes. It's like a die, right? You spin it, you play it. So my hunch is that it could be associated with converso Jewish practices in the American Southwest. So I think that this is an interesting take.
Well, isn't there the story about the great rabbi or somebody, and I don't remember who was in charge of Palestine at the time. They wanted to teach Torah, but they weren't allowed to. So they would pretend they were doing a game with the dreidel, and hide the fact that they were teaching when the guards or sentinels weren't around.
Yeah.
And it was take two, put one, take it all, leave it all.
Judaism by subterfuge, right?
Right.
Okay, I want to give David Sklar the rest of the hour. David waves so everybody sees you. David, I can't read your name there. David is the assistant director at the Jewish Community Relations Council, formerly the director of government affairs, which he still continues to do for the Jewish Community Relations Council. David grew up at Beth-El. We're proud to have him and his wife Sarah and their children as members of the synagogue. And David sits on the board of directors of the synagogue as well, where he chairs our social action initiatives. And it's always a pleasure to have David on these programs. I've been exploiting him a lot over the past months by having him host some cocktail Judaisms. Perhaps some of you saw the last two cocktail Judaisms conversations on the elections. He did a great job moderating those programs. And I'm delighted to have him every year talk to this group on issues of Jewish community life today, both what is on the plate, what is on the agenda of Jewish life, and how the Jewish community is structured outside of the institutions of the synagogue to serve the needs of the Jewish community.
Well, thank you, Rabbi. It's good to see everybody. Good to meet many of you. Good to see again a few of you. I'm always happy to be asked by Rabbi Dennis to do these events or things like Cocktail Judaism. My way of certainly being part of the congregational life. So I really appreciate it. As Rabbi Dennis said, he has asked me to sort of walk you through the next hour. To be honest, I don't know that my comments will take that long, so I'll just kind of go through a few things, and then I hope that we'll have some opportunity for some questions and discussions. That's where I really enjoy spending most of my time conversing with folks versus lecturing folks. So what I thought I would do, as Rabbi Dennis mentioned, is just kind of walk you through. Obviously, he's thrown out the term Jewish Community Relations Council. I'm sure many know exactly what that is, but we'll walk through the purpose of my agency, a little bit of the community structure, again, as Rabbi Dennis said, outside of the synagogue structure, talk just a little bit about a couple of the issues that are on our plate, how we come to our decision-making process, how we move through our decision-making process about what we're going to work on, and then we'd be happy to talk about any issues of current events or things like that, and how maybe the Jewish community is responding to them. So I'll just jump right in. First of all, I will preemptively apologize, as I'm, it's common now, but kids are here. They're finished with their religious school this morning. So if you hear a ruckus or a giant crash somewhere off, don't worry, it's just my kids. I feel like Zoom should just have a disclaimer now, about being home and working with your kids. And then I have my notes here. So if you see me looking away, it's not that I don't appreciate looking at all of your lovely faces this morning. I'm just kind of checking my notes here. But so Jewish community structure. So the Indianapolis Jewish community was basically founded or created by mostly German, but not all German Jewish immigrants in the late 1850s. In 1904, those immigrants formally organized themselves into what was then called the Jewish Welfare Agency. Before them, most of the Jewish community organization was benevolent societies, congregations, and ethnic religious communities or national religious communities, like the Germans or Hungarians and others would create their own benevolent societies. And those were the first sort of pieces of organization in the community. And they formally organized again in 1904 into the Jewish Welfare Agency. Then that agency was charged with providing social services for the Jewish community and particularly focused around issues of making sure that the Jewish community members, again, who were at that time mostly European immigrants, were able to ingrain into American society. So, it was a lot of things like education classes, language classes, how to engage with their neighbors, and all those kinds of things, along with a lot of social services. Now that organization, what was then the Jewish Welfare Agency, is now called the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis. And that here in the community, from a communal perspective, is really our blanket organization that organizes the rest of the community, the Jewish sort of non-sectarian or non-religious Jewish community. The best way to think of a Jewish federation, and there are about 150 Jewish federations around the country. Most Jewish communities with a sizable population have a Jewish federation. Here in Indiana, I believe that there are 4 or 5 Jewish federations. So we have one here in Greater Indianapolis. There's also Lafayette. There is Northwest Indiana. There's South Bend, and a couple of others. So you can imagine that they are from the organized from the biggest communities like New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and Boston down to some of the smallest communities like we have here even in Indiana. So those organizations fall under a blanket organization called the Jewish Federations of North America, and it's their organizing body. The best way to kind of think of a Jewish federation here is as a Jewish United Way. Its main purpose is to organize a annual campaign each year where it raises dollars and then disseminates those dollars to Jewish community agencies and organizations, both locally and abroad, whether it be in Israel or Europe or in other places, and supports Jewish organizations, Jewish causes, and some not Jewish, to be honest. Here in Indianapolis, the Jewish Federation has a number of what we call constituent agencies. We have Hooverwood, which is our Jewish nursing home. We have the Jewish Community Center, which is responsible for community interaction, health and fitness, youth services like camp and after-school care, and arts and education services. I'm sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Whatever that was based downtown across. So you might be referring to, Tony asked, whatever happened to the lending society that was based downtown across from the Regan Street Bakery? Tony, I don't know. You might be referring to the old location of the Jewish Federation, which used to be in the English Foundation building? No. Okay.
This is before.
Then I'm not sure. I'd have to look into it. I apologize.
Okay.
So sorry. So we have Hooverwood, Jewish Nursing Home, Jewish Community Center, Jewish Family Services, which is our Jewish social services agency. And then we have the Jewish Community Relations Council, which is my organization, which is responsible for government affairs and community relations and consensus building for the Jewish communities. So we have a number of responsibilities. But really, overall, it comes down to our responsibility at the JCRC is to be the face of the Jewish community out to the general community around us. And I'll get into why that is here. So the Community Relations Council, just a brief history of us. We were formed in 1942 by leaders of again, what was then the Jewish Welfare Agency. There are about 125 JCRCs around the country, again, of varying size, some in the larger communities like Boston and Chicago have, somewhere between 10 to 20 to even 30 staffers, I think, maybe in Boston, down to some of the smallest JCRCs around the country, which are single staff members or maybe even single part-time staff members that share responsibilities with their Jewish federations. So we are of varying sizes, and we are loosely affiliated through an organization called the Jewish Council for Public Affairs, which has historically been the convening body for Jewish community relations councils around the country. I think our history is pretty important and pretty interesting, and I like to share it. And it's that, obviously you heard me say that we were organized in 1942. And if, obviously everybody thinks back a little bit to probably what you've already learned in this class, but at least to our history books, you can think about what was happening in 1942 in the 1940s. And basically we, JCRCs around the country, were created at a time when the American Jewish community was learning and to be honest, actually had a pretty good understanding of what was happening on the ground in Europe at that time, particularly European Jewry. It was already clear by the late 30s into the early 40s what was already happening to the Jewish community, and certainly what was going to befall them if conditions didn't change on the ground. And the Jewish community took that issue to our elected leaders to try to raise awareness and get help for European Jews, and honestly were to a certain extent rebuffed. And we as a community realized that we had not engaged strongly enough in, sort of quote unquote, the public square, sort of a political science term, the public square, but we had not engaged strongly enough in the public square to raise our clout as a community to elected officials and policymakers in the United States. And so, the Jewish community on a whole decided that it needed to organize and create a stronger presence in that public square. And so the community relations movement was created and established across the United States. And most historic JCRCs, there are some newer JCRCs, but most historic JCRCs were created during that time period of the 1940s. So since then, since obviously the end of World War II, our mission has changed a little bit, but really at the end of the day, most of our work, even today in 2020, falls back in some way to that seminal moment in our community's history. And the mission that we have and the work that we do really falls back to this broad concept of working to protect Jews. And we obviously do that in a number of ways, but our mission at the JCRC, if you look at our website, is to protect Jews here, abroad, and in Israel and across the world. And we know that certainly locally and nationally here in the United States, really the best way that we can do that we can protect ourselves as a community is by working in the public sphere, with other communities, with other coalition partners, and even amongst ourselves to create a community around us that protects us by ensuring that, again, the general community around us, it has principles of, has small d democratic principles, is pluralistic, is non-sectarian, is educated, is healthy, and all of these things, has access to healthcare. All these things, because when these things fail, and we see it happening now today, and we've certainly seen it throughout our history, when these types of things fail, that's when democracy itself fails. And that is when we as a community are certainly most in danger. And so here we, at the JCRC here, we often use this term coined by my former boss, who had been with the agency for 35 years, of this term called enlightened self-interest, right? It's important for us to go out in the community and work on all these issues, because it's the right, not only the right thing to do, but it helps protect us as a community by making sure that we as a Jewish community are living in a strong and democratic community that surrounds us. So the current structure of the Jcrc, we are a 501c3 organization. We are our own independent 501c3. So you heard me call us a constituent agency of the Jewish Federation, but we are still our own organization. But we get about 78% of our current budget from the Jewish Federation campaign that I talked about. So we don't do a whole lot of fundraising ourselves. We're stepping into that ballgame a little bit, but mostly up until now, we've said, if you support our work in the Jcrc, support the campaign, support the fundraising efforts of the Jewish Federation, because it trickles down to us. So our board of directors is made up of representatives from all the other Jewish Federation constituent agencies. So we have reps from the JCC, from Hooverwood, from other organizations. We also have representatives from almost all the synagogues in town. So Beth-El has actually 2 representatives on our board because of its size. So almost all the other synagogues and congregations in town, as well as Jewish membership organizations like National Council for Jewish Women. We used to have B'nai B'rith, and we have a couple of other membership organizations that are represented around our board. And that board table then becomes what we like to call the consensus building table, or the consensus building body of the organized Jewish community. So it's around our table where those representatives come, they discuss issues, and they basically set the agenda and the consensus positions for the organized Jewish community. And then it is our responsibility as an agency to take those positions and go out and do that work of the community in the public. So when it comes to, we have a couple of at-large members on our board that we go through a nominations process, but when it comes to the representational organizations, representation of the organizations like congregations or the Federation agencies, we actually have no part in selecting those members. So the Beth-El board determines for itself who the representatives will be that come to the Jcrc table. And in that way, we almost work a little bit like a trade association. But what that allows us to do is make sure that the Jcrc itself isn't influencing that decision-making process, but the community itself is sending representatives that it wants, and then working to build consensus from there. So I'll talk a little bit about our sort of mission and focus areas. And then, I do want to, again, hopefully in our discussion, we'll have some time to talk about some specific issues and how the Jewish community has responded of late. But among our focus areas, and I'll just list them out and then go through them a little bit individually. We work on things like government affairs. Obviously, you heard Rabbi Dennis call me our government affairs director. That has been my historic position since I've been with Jcrc, coming up on 15 years now, is basically to be the registered lobbyist on behalf of the community and working with elected officials to represent Jewish community positions. We do a lot of work on Israel advocacy. We work on confronting anti-Semitism. Then we do anti-Semitism and Israel education. We also do Holocaust and genocide awareness education. And recently, we've been stepping into this sort of the world of media and trying to help the community represent itself within media circles. So in government affairs, again, sort of this is my hat, my portfolio. We have, since the beginning, since our creation in 1942, we have been sort of the government affairs arm of the Jewish community, representing the Jewish community to all levels of government, local, state, and federal. I am registered on the state level as a registered lobbyist for the Indiana General Assembly. During Indiana General Assembly legislative sessions, which generally happen from January to April, or end of March to April, I am at our Indiana State House almost full time, working on matters of public policy representing the Jewish community. We also work very closely with our city county council in Indianapolis and are building relationships with other communities where we now have sizable Jewish communities, particularly in Carmel and their town councils and city council. Again, with the Indiana General Assembly at the state level, and then obviously maintain strong relationships with all of our members of Congress here in Indiana, both the House of Representatives and our two senators. When it comes to government affairs, we really have sort of two portfolios. The first is what we call our domestic policy portfolio. And these are really what I would term classic social justice type issues. These are really the issues that are at that heart of ensuring, again, that we have a small d democratic, pluralistic, safe, educated, well-fed, well taken care of communities. So, we are engaging every day at the General Assembly on issues like poverty reduction, economic self-sufficiency, healthcare, immigration, budgeting for human services, all these types of racial justice and equity, all these types of sort of social justice type issues that go to the heart of that, creating that domestic community that we want to live in. Internationally, we mainly focus on Israel and Israel advocacy, and this happens probably more so at the federal level, where we are, potentially confronting bills that might have an anti-Israel bias, or supporting things like military funding packages, aid packages, other policy initiatives that have to do with Israel. So that's kind of our domestic policy, and I think I should have the ability to share my screen. It looks like I do, and I'll just bring up really quickly before I move on. Can everybody see this? It says Jcrc Guiding Principles for Advocacy.
It is up on the screen.
Okay, great, thank you. So this is a document that we work through every year. I apologize for many actions this morning, so I didn't have a chance to send it to everybody preemptively, but I can absolutely share it with Jackie and Rabbi Dennis, and he or she can email it out to you guys if you'd like to have your own copy. But basically, as I mentioned, when we sit down around the table and come up with our consensus positions, this is how we organize and disseminate those positions publicly. So you can see that these are our guiding principles for advocacy. This is my road, particularly as our government affairs director, in how we will engage on policy issues. We have a committee structure where I have a government affairs committee. They send recommendations to the board discusses it, and then we vote or accept these various positions. And you can see here, if you can see my cursor, we just actually updated and approved this most recent version just a couple of weeks ago at our December board meeting. But you'll see, let me see if I actually make this a little smaller so we can see the full page. There we go. These first sections are what we call leadership. These are issues that are near and dear to us that we say it would not matter who was standing up to us, next to us, with regards to coalition partners or like-minded organizations. If we were standing alone, these are the issues that we would still be working on, no matter whether we had any support from any other community organizations. Working against bias crimes or hate crimes, civil rights, immigrants and refugees, Israel, and working to ensure a separation of church and state. And then the second page here is involvement. These are the places where we're going to work with coalition partners, with other like-minded organizations to engage on these issues: children, criminal justice, economic opportunity, fair elections, healthcare, older adults, public safety, reproductive rights, and taxation. So So I'm not going to leave this up on my screen to read every word. I'm happy to go back to it in our discussion. And again, we'll send it to Rabbi Dennis so that he can, and Jackie, so that they can share this out to everybody and take a look at it. But that, again, that kind of gives us our policy roadmap. So Israel Advocacy, again, this is, we are the agency and organization that I'd say most of our congregations, most of our organizations in some way do some level of Israel education, engagement, support. But we, at the heart of what we do is really, again, at a policy level. And again, we're doing everything from education. We will, in times of conflict, be the agency that sort of rallies community support for Israel when it finds itself in times of conflict. And we are often working with our state agencies and local leaders to create things like stronger relationships between the state of Israel and Indiana companies or Israeli companies in the state of Indiana. So creating, helping try to facilitate like business to business relationships. So our Israel Advocacy is really has a pretty wide spectrum, everything from education to really tangible relationship building and support. Confronting anti-Semitism. We are sort of the first stop for finding out about anti-Semitic incidences when they happen to the community and confronting those. And we can, in our discussion, if we want to get into it, we can certainly talk about I can give a number of examples in recent months and years where we have worked to, really confront very specific events and incidents, and we track those. And we work with national partner organizations like the Anti-Defamation League. We work on policy issues and security related issues and a number of different things when it comes to really specifically confronting anti-Semitism. The other way we work on anti-Semitism is our anti-Semitism and Israel education. So you've heard me talk about the tangible way we do Israel advocacy, the tangible way we confront anti-Semitism. And then we also do a lot of education around these things. So our Israel education could be anything from speakers to events to, trying to make sure that, I think those are, from an education perspective, those are probably our biggest things, but educational events and speakers where we're working to educate the community on, on current events or political dynamics on the ground in Israel, or again, ways Israel is interacting with the Jewish community here locally. Like for instance, just 2 weeks ago, we welcomed the Israeli Consul General from the consulate in Chicago into the community via Zoom, and he did a briefing on current events and the relationship between the Jewish community here in Indianapolis and the consulate in Chicago and Israel itself. So we do these educational type events. When it comes to anti-Semitism and Israel education, we also have a number of new initiatives, one in particular that we call our Stand Up, Speak Out initiative, where we heard from members of the Jewish community, particularly parents, who were saying to us that their kids were not prepared to confront these types of issues, whether it be, specifically anti-Semitism that they've experienced, or, we see a lot of anti-Israel bias on, in schools, on college campuses and places like that. And parents were coming to us and saying, our kids are not prepared to sort of go out into the world and have these conversations and be able to have these discussions and confront these things, anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias, when they are seeing them. So we have started creating some new initiatives, again, very specifically our Stand Up, Speak Out initiative, which is working specifically with middle schoolers, with high schoolers, and with college students to learn how to have these discussions, to get more information, to work through discussion practices, and be able to engage on these issues, whether it be around a student government association or just in a classroom in high school or on a college campus, and and really be able to speak effectively and advocate either for Israel or be able to confront anti-Semitism when they experience it. Moving on, Holocaust and genocide awareness education. Holocaust education has always been something that has been a part of Jcrc. Obviously we as a community make a commitment to ourselves to, always recognize, remember the Holocaust, ensure that we try to ensure that it will never happen again. And so we've always done, Holocaust education. Over recent years, we've added a staff member and now actually a second staff member just in the last couple of weeks to really specifically focus on genocide awareness. And so we're excited by this opportunity that we have. So on the Holocaust front, we are working very specifically with teachers, engaging with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum to bring in their educational resources and making sure that these educational opportunities and resources are finding their way into the hands of both students and teachers. And then, like I just mentioned, we actually just brought in a staff member just about a week ago who has a very strong background in genocide awareness and in confronting contemporary genocides. And so this is some work that we are going to dig into and do a little bit more. You may have heard recently things in the news about the Rohingya in Myanmar, the Uyghur in China, which they're a Muslim minority in China, and the things happening to these communities. And so we are tying ourselves into some national network organizations that are focusing on these contemporary genocides and hope that we will strengthen our advocacy and education around some of these contemporary genocides. And again, for us at the Jcrc and certainly our community, this is a way that we can, to a certain extent, embody never again by working to make sure that we are confronting contemporary genocide and making sure that they're not happening. Finally, media. We have a great staff member who has really raised our media presence. And this just goes back to this concept of wanting to be the public face of the Jewish community and ensuring that we're supporting our Jewish community agencies. So we want to certainly raise awareness of the work that we're doing as a community, and we're doing that through the media, but also to support our agencies and congregations in times of crisis when they might have to engage with the media. Excuse me, I feel a sneeze coming up. It's like right there, so I apologize if I do sneeze. So those are really our focus areas. I will say that all encompassing through all of this, and I've droned on a little bit here, but all encompassing through all of this is that we know the Jewish community is a relatively small community. We have a lot of support. We certainly have a lot of leadership. We have a lot of strength as a community, but part of all of this, again, that creating a stronger community, about engaging in these issues, about creating opportunities for education, really is not as effective without partnering with outside organizations, with other communities. So intertwined through all of this, our government affairs, our education work, our confronting anti-Semitism and everything is a constant flow of building relationships with other interfaith communities, with other ethnic communities, with other coalition partners, particularly on the policy side, where we are working with other human service providers and advocacy organizations and things like that. So almost everything that we do, while focused on the needs and the important issues of the Jewish community, has a relationship building component to it. And those relationships are really important in the work that we do. And again, creating that community around us that we want to engage in. So finally, just the last little bit, I would say also everything that we do is sort of, when we're thinking about communal structure, is tied into a national network. So some folks often joke that the Jewish community itself is nothing if it's not over-organized. Each sort of segment of the community is organized and then has another organizational level of it. But again, the synagogues themselves, I'm sure Rabbi Dennis has talked a little bit about the synagogues themselves, are tied into their own religious networks, like the conservative movement and the Reconstructionist movement here at Beth-El. The federations, as I mentioned, are tied into their national network, the Jewish Federations of North America, which is their blanket organization. I mentioned the Jcrcs are tied into our blanket organization, loosely affiliated through the Jewish Council for Public Affairs. And then there are lots of other supporting independent organizations. The JCCs, the Jewish Community Center, are tied into their own association called the Jewish Community Centers of America. The JFS and the Jewish Social Services are tied into their own national network. And then we have a number of supporting organizations in the community and independent organizations like the Anti-Defamation League, the American Jewish Community, the American Jewish Committee, organizations like the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, National Council for Jewish Women, and a number of organizations. And, while it does get maybe just a tiny little bit turfy sometimes, for the most part, the Jewish community nationally on the whole works very well together, where these organizations are supporting each other. So we are working here locally always very closely with the Chicago office of the Anti-Defamation League, with the Chicago office of the American Jewish Committee, and others. So we have both our local organization structure and our national organizations and structure. And so at this point, I have droned on long enough. I would really love to open it up to discussion again, maybe talk a little bit about some current events and answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you, David. That's an excellent synopsis of the issues that we engage with. I like to think of the many agencies with which the synagogue partners as kind of being the spokes and spokespersons.
Yes.
The essential values that the synagogue stands for, in the sense that at the heart of the Jewish synagogue experience, the religious experience, are certain fundamental values. We have talked about that. Their values of this, values of justice, their values of coexistence, of unity, of oneness, of affirmation of diversity, et cetera, et cetera. And so the synagogue is the setting in which these traditions are preserved, nurtured, and enhanced. And then the partnership that the synagogue has with the Federation and its various agencies, particularly the Jcrc, which exemplifies what I would call prophetic values in the Jewish tradition. How do we make society a better place? How do we bring justice, equity, and compassion to the work that we do? So these are the arms, the extensions. And it affirms the principle that we have been trying to express, that Judaism is beyond a system of believing, a system of belonging and behaviors. So we thank David for his involvement in the synagogue and for his leadership with the Jcrc. And I'll open the Zoom for any questions that you might have of him. You answered every question, David, huh?
Apparently.
So,
don't be shy.
Tell people how they can get engaged, beyond their synagogue experience in the life of the community.
Sure. So, really I would say that whatever your interest is, there is some way for you to be involved in Jewish communal life. Obviously we are focused on Jcrc on an educational side, certainly on a government affairs and public policy side. So we ourselves have a committee structure. We have our board of directors, which are either sent again by the representative organizations or elected through a nominating process for our at-large members. But you don't have to be on the board of directors to be engaged in the Jcrc's work. Each one of our focus areas has a committee that is open to any member of the Jewish community. So I have a government affairs committee. If you're interested in public policy issues, you can join that committee, and we work our way through, both setting these positions, which I pulled up on the screen, but also, setting some direction during our legislative sessions about, we go through what bills we're going to work on, what issues we're going to engage on, how exactly we're going to do that work. And so there's a really hands-on, tangible way for you to get involved in these types of decisions. But we then have a committee around community relations that helps us build those relationships out in the community and get involved in issues like building relationships with the Muslim community, with the Christian community, with the Latino community, with the LGBTQ plus community. So all these different relationship building exercises can be done through our committee work. And then we have a Israel and Holocaust Education Committee. So if you're interested in these types of Israel advocacy, or you're a teacher, or are interested in these educational opportunities, we have a committee to do that. And that's just the Jcrc. I think most congregations have their social action committees, like Rabbi Dennis mentioned. There are committees at the DCC. There's a social services committee at the JFS if you're a social worker and want to get involved that way. So really, anything that you find interesting, any way that you can want to get involved, I can guarantee you that I can certainly help you get engaged in the tangible work of the Jewish community some way. So Nancy asked to me directly, what do you consider the most pressing issue for the Jewish community here in Indianapolis? That's an interesting question. I think if you talked to most Jewish community members, I think there's a really a very specific concern about anti-Semitism right now. And I think that's probably our most pressing issue to confront as a Jewish community. We have seen a rising tide of anti-Semitism here, both in the country, in the United States, and abroad. Particularly for the last 5 to 6 years. There are a lot of factors that weigh into that: economic, political, all kinds of things. Security itself, physical security of our institutions and our agencies and our congregations has only been heightened after the last few years, particularly after the Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, the San Diego shooting. We had a major vandalism here in our community where a very, to be honest, very well painted Nazi flag and swastika were spray painted on one of our congregations here in the greater Indianapolis area, Cherry Tefillah up in Carmel. To the point where we have the Jewish Federation has actually brought in a full-time security director. So security and anti-Semitism, confronting anti-Semitism, I think are probably the most pressing issue for the Jewish community here. And we like to do that. This is an interesting area because we like to balance that work. Obviously it's a very pressing issue for our community, and we want to do what we can. You've heard me talk a lot about already this morning, anti-Semitism education and working to confront it and how pressing an issue it is. But we don't want it to define us either as a community. We don't want anti-Semitism to be the only thing that we engage on, the only thing that we care about, because it just sends a message of, to a certain extent, defeatism or pessimism. So we have to engage on it, but we have to do it in a way where it is not the only thing that defines our community, because our community is filled with life and celebration and opportunity, and we want to make sure that does not get lost in confronting this very important issue. So, Rabbi, you look like you were going to jump in there.
No, I was just going to say that you affirmed the concept of not a reactive Judaism, but a proactive Judaism, right? Our Judaism is defined by those who oppose us. We define contours of Jewish life, and unfortunately, there are always, sadly, historically and presently, forces that seek to diminish that. And it's important that we join with other communities who experience bigotry and persecution as well, so that we can work together. Unfortunately, sometimes different groups that are being scapegoated or persecuted don't quite understand one another and their own experiences, and they may even, unfortunately, turn against one another. So one of the issues in dealing with anti-Semitism is to maintain the distinctiveness, the uniqueness of the Jewish experience, while at the same time seeing it as a part of a larger problem in our society and working with others. Yeah, thank you. I should mention that sitting right next to David Sklar on my screen is Alan Hamburger. Alan's daughter, Margot, who's married to our president, Dan Fox, is a high-level professional with the Jewish Federation of Greater Indianapolis. Margot does a lot of the implementational work at the federation level that David executes through the Jcrc.
Yeah. So I have another direct question. Clear my throat.
You have
from Tony. No, I do, from Tony. And Tony, if you want to come off mute and just maybe clarify just a little bit. I think your question is just sort of maybe some accomplishments or not accomplishments from a public policy perspective that we've experienced.
Well, our representation in the state, not the elected representatives in the state and the senators in the state. I've never quite understood the Indiana 1 year, 2 year, 1 short year, 1 long year.
Okay,
business.
Sure.
But nothing much seems to get accomplished. That I mean, what in your sphere has been accomplished or been thwarted in the legislature in this past couple of years?
Sure. So let me talk a little bit about the politics of Indiana from our perspective. So one thing that I didn't mention in our public policy work that speaks to Tony's question is that as a 501c3 organization, we are strictly nonpartisan. We do not endorse candidates. We do not do any electioneering. We don't take any overtly political stances. We work on legislation that emanates from both sides of the aisle, and we do our best as we can. I do the best that I can to work with legislators on both sides of the aisle on issues, and we will take support wherever we get it. Now, the challenging piece of that, the little bit of a challenging piece of that is that while we don't make any designs on the politics of the community, it's very clear, just if you look at demographic and political information and data, the Jewish community, to a certain extent, swings a little bit to the left. And this is not just us; it's nationally. I mean, if you look at the presidential election that we just had on November 3rd, President-elect Joe Biden received somewhere, I think, in the range of 75% support from the Jewish community, 75 to 25. And so, I would say, as a community on a whole, our positions tend to gravitate a little bit more towards the center left end of the political spectrum. And again, it's not because we design it that way. We certainly take into account the opinions and often temper our positions based on the positions of more conservative members of our community and do what we can there. But generally, I'm not laying out any kind of community secret when I say that our positions tend to gravitate a little bit more center left. And so here in Indiana, when we have a legislature that is a super Republican majority, both in the House and the Senate. Democrats do not even need to be in the building for legislative business to take place at the General Assembly. Our positions are not always directly in line with the politics of the General Assembly, and it creates some challenges for us. But we do what we can to work across the aisle and to build relationships with legislative members across the aisle. So as far as accomplishments and potentially where we've been thwarted, certainly, Tony, I think your personal position on what's been accomplished at the legislature obviously potentially falls in line. I'm not speaking you. I'm just saying you in the general. With what your political viewpoints are. For us, just thinking through some accomplishments just in the years that I've been working, I think we have had quite a few accomplishments. Maybe not things that people would expect, but Jcrc helped. Again, just thinking off a few things off of the top of my head. Jcrc was very tangentially involved in helping create Indiana's first anti-bullying and anti-cyberbullying laws. We helped create an ombudsman for the Department of Child Services so that families had a legal representative and opportunity to address concerns with Department of Child Services. We've worked very strongly again for supporting strong funding and budgets for human services. We helped lead the charge back in 2011 and 2012 to keep the conversation around Medicaid expansion alive in the state up to the point where ultimately we created the HIP, the Healthy Indiana Plan, and the HIP 2.0 plan. We kept that conversation around Medicaid expansion alive. And then recently, just in the last 4 or 5 years, I'm particularly proud of the work that we did around trying to create a hate crimes law or bias crimes law here in Indiana. Indiana, depending on how you view it, either was or continues to be one of 5 states in the country that did not have any kind of hate law. And we worked for a period of 5 years to raise awareness of this issue. To really build a strong statewide coalition of both the advocacy organizations and businesses around the state in support of this issue, and bring it to the attention of the General Assembly. Ultimately, in 2019, a bill passed. It wasn't the bill that we wanted to see. We still think it needs to be strengthened and needs to be amended. But really, that was a 25 or 30 year conversation here in the state that we were able to, I would say, if we're using football terms, I'd say we got a field goal instead of a touchdown. We'd like to, we got something passed. It was 3 points versus 6, but we'd like to eventually go back and get the touchdown on that one. But I was very proud of that work. So I could come up with probably another half dozen great examples. Actually, one thing that I will highlight, maybe I think 3 years ago, there was actually a really badly written bill around prayer in schools again. If you can imagine that this conversation came back again, prayer in schools, and the lack of accommodation for students if there were going to be prayers offered at graduation ceremonies and sporting events, and we were able to basically water that bill down to the point where, while it still passed, it wouldn't do anything. So that was another accomplishment we have. Thwarted, again, I would say, I would draw attention to hate crimes law. It was thwarted to the point where something passed. It wasn't what we wanted to see. Certainly there have been any number of other things that I could highlight when it comes to funding, human services, immigration, some other things that have passed here in recent years that we don't particularly like, and we'll do what we can to try to correct in the future. But I think that's about it. Again, happy to answer any other questions on some specific bills or issues.
David, I think that with that, we are going to close it because I have to do a little bit of housekeeping.
Sure.
I just wanted to, I don't know if you were on when I mentioned that in the spring, I think March 7th is the date that we have set aside with that. We are partnering with the Masorti movement in Israel, their office is there and their Center for Religious Pluralism. And we're going to be having one of their leaders, Dr. Moshe Hess, I think this is certainly Hess, I think it's Moshe Hess. He's going to be talking about issues of religious pluralism in Israel. And I think that this might be of interest to the Jcrc constituency. And I'd like to disseminate it beyond the synagogue. Jackie will give you information about that. Thank you so much, David. I think
my pleasure.
People have a better understanding. You're welcome to stay on for a few moments. I just have to wrap up because this is our last session of this series. And if you ever have any questions, I'm sure that David would be eager to respond to them. And we will circulate for you, Jackie, the screenshots that he showed you this morning about the agenda of the Jcrc. Thanks a lot. And you're welcome to stay. And since this is our last session, I wanted to thank you all for participating as well. And I was wondering if we could just go around and in 15 to 30 seconds, each of you would just tell me, what is your main takeaway from this series? We've been meeting together for 8 sessions. We've covered Judaism in about as tight a nutshell as we can, and we have hopefully given you resources and ways to think about things and further exploration. But what is your most important takeaway? If we could just, I don't want to force anybody, but if anybody would like to just share in 15 to 30 seconds at the most, what is your most important takeaway from this experience? Yes, Jim.
I've come to learn that, of course, I'm relatively new at this completely, but I've come to learn that Judaism is probably one of the most misunderstood religions, or whatever you want to call it. And somehow I would like to learn how to handle situations when they come up, rather than just all of a sudden be surprised by someone coming up and telling me I killed Jesus and what I should do.
Okay. That's continuous material to think about. It has to do with anti-Semitism that we were talking about earlier. It's one of the components of historic anti-Semitism. You know, there's historic anti-Semitism, religious anti-Semitism, political anti-Semitism, racial anti-Semitism. It all kind of wraps around together around certain concepts. Thanks. Any others to share?
Yes. Rabbi Dennis, this is Nancy. And one thing.
Are you really sitting between rows of books?
I need a lot more education. Yes, I am. One, I want to thank you so much. I just got a lot out of these sessions, but I think what I'm coming out of it and realizing is I've got a lot more I need to learn.
That's the point, right? That's why in the Talmud, each tome, each volume is, the first page is always the letter Bet, not the letter Aleph. Each volume begins with page number 2 to remind you that no matter how much you have learned, you haven't gotten to page number 1 yet.
That's true.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for participating. Any other sharings?
I definitely picked up quite a bit on just like, I really like the sections on Jewish life and those areas. And I love some of the resources that you guys have recommended. There's definitely a whole lot more books to read out there. And so I will be doing several of that in the next couple of months before not together.
Thank you. Okay.
Sorry. I think jumping off of Nancy's point that there's always more to learn. I think one of my biggest takeaways from this is, that you can't really learn it alone, and to get yourself a rabbi and a friend, or in this case, a good 24 friends.
Thank you, Tori. You know, I think you know that you have quoted Pirkei Avot in your remark. There's a teaching in Pirkei Avot, of which we have a series of. It says, "Aseh lecha rav uknei lecha chaver." Means get yourself a rabbi, get yourself a friend. Meaning, it could mean that the rabbi and the friend is the same person, and I hope you can think that way. But it also means learn and share. Judaism's learning is always done with another person. Thank you. What else? Take away a parting question.
It's been interesting to listen to all the new people new to Judaism. I grew up with it, and I went through all the services you can go through. And I love the questions and the answers and the camaraderie and the chats between folks about what they're thinking about and how they're going to approach learning more about it.
Yeah. I have found the Zoom experience, which I did not know what would turn out to be a very interesting way of sharing this. We haven't been face to face, person to person, but I think this group has developed a certain sense of cohesive corporate identity. I hope that you will all stay connected as we move forward. Any other thoughts? Okay, well, with that, I thank you. Stay in touch, and it's been a pleasure to teach and to learn. Mikol melamdai hiskalti, say the rabbis, I have learned from every person I have taught. So thanks for your teaching. Enjoy the day ahead.
Happy Hanukkah.
And happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Don't forget about the celebration next week, the last night of Hanukkah.
Yeah, we have lots of things still on the agenda. Check out the calendars.
Okay.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.